Have you seen me dice bag? The Grognard Files.
Hello, my name is Dirk the Dice, and this is the Grognard Files podcast, talking bobbins about tabletop RPGs from back in the day and today. I'm coming live from my secret safe house in Adlington, Chorley, in the northwest of England. I'm surrounded by my cache of equipment and the great library of RPGs and a selection of eyes-only Grognard files. Here on my left is the focus of my solace when things get tough. It's my ridiculous homemade shrine to the actor Caroline Munro. I'll just give it a double tap. Whoa! It's got stuck between two manifestations. Naomi, the wet worker in a swimming costume from The Spy Who Loved Me, and Laura Bellows, a vampiric assassin drained of blood in Dracula 1972 AD. It can only mean one thing. It's Night's Black Agents, a vampire spy thriller by Kenneth Haight. Before that, we've had another review on that fruity iTunes. We're always very grateful for feedback more than anything else, and this is from Cursed Monkey Hand. Tea, biscuits and games. Listening to this podcast is the RPG equivalent of an Hovis advert. Nostalgic and strangely comforting, although without the bikes and the steep hills. Thanks for that. Night's Black Agents. I know what you're thinking. Isn't that one of those new games? Has the nostalgic Grognard Files finally sold out to the hot newness? Well, see you in court. This was the first game I bought after the Deep Freeze. That wasn't a retrofit as something that I played back in the day. Night's Black Agents is a spy thriller emulator built on the Gumshoe engine created by Robin Laws. It's a lightweight investigation system that creates a forward momentum for scenarios instead of seeking information like treasure in an old school dungeon crawl. In Gumshoe, you always get the clue. You just need to make sense of it. UK publisher Pelgrane Press have produced a number of settings for the system, including the Esoterists, a world of conflicting global conspiracies, Fear itself, a more straightforward horror setting, Mutant City Blues, investigation in the world of supers, Ashen Stars, a space opera, and there's much, much more. But it's probably Ken Haight's Trail of Cthulhu and the fantastic supporting products that have popularised Gumshoe. Stick a Shoggoth in it and everyone's happy. If you go back to episode 4, when we went to GROGMEET in 2015, you'll hear the moment when I purchased some of my blood from Ken Haight himself. I was confused at first because I assumed that the Dracula dossier was a standalone game, rather than a campaign pack for Night's Black Agents. I was intrigued by the idea of Bram Stoker's novel being recast as a after-action report for generations of MI6 operatives who were attempting to employ Dracula as an espionage asset. Fighting Dracula. That's cool, isn't it? I'm really pleased that we have Gareth Ryder-Hanrahan as a guest in this episode, as he was the joint author of the Dracula dossier. He talks about his formative role-playing years in Cork, the convention scene in Ireland, and his role in reviving some of the 80s classics for Mongoose, as well as sharing some of his thoughts on Night's Black Agents. He offers some tips for my convention game, Operation GROUNDWORM, set against the backdrop of the 1984-85 UK miners' strike. The scenario provides a hint of a more sinister explanation for the government's programme of closing profitable mines. It's a session that I've run a few times now, and I have an edited extract from the version from Virtual GROGMEET, the online meetup that happened in April for patrons. We tried to emulate the British TV series The Professionals, Ken Loach's Hidden Agenda, and the film Blast Off, as if it was directed by Quentin Tarantino, if you can imagine such a thing. I should warn you that there's a gratuitous clip of Mrs. Thatch and the casual use of 80s #problematic idiom, not suitable for minors. I'll never tire of that joke. Later, I'm joined by Judge Blythy, our resident rules lawyer, who's ready to sink his teeth into the finer points of spending points. This is the last sequence of Grog Pods about spies and espionage. We've covered Top Secret, Mercenary Spies and Private Eyes, and the James Bond RPG. Diligent listeners will know that I promised to have a poll to choose a film clip that we would replicate using a rule set of your choice. As time's gone on, I've become a bit lost in the detail of it, and it appears much more complicated than it really is. I suppose that's a theme of this episode. I'm sure I'll work it out. I'm sure. Well, Ramblers, let's get rambling.
Open box.
Welcome to Open Box, the section of the podcast where we look back to look forward, how our past has shaped our gaming. Joining us all the way from Cork Island is our very special guest, Gareth Ryder-Hanrahan. He's an author, games designer, adventure engineer extraordinaire, writer of such classics as Eyes of the Stone Thief for 13th Age, and of course the Dracula dossier for Night's Black Agents. He's the man that Robin D. Laws, Ken Hite turned to. This is a project for Gar. Hello there, Gareth.
Hello.
So how does it feel to be a troubleshooter?
I'm not sure if troubleshooter is the right word. More sort of like, I don't know, understudy, second stringer.
Thanks for joining us at the Grognard Files.
Not at all.
How we start all of these interviews is, how did you get into the hobby? And what did you start playing with?
Many, many years ago, I was hugely into Tolkien and The Lord of the Rings, and I'd never heard of gaming or anything. The local library were running a Tolkien week, and I wandered in at the age of like 11 or so, and there were all these people around a table doing something, and there were these strange little figures and maps and things. They were running a demo game of some variation of MERP. They said, "I want to join in," and I stuck my hand up instantly. They handed me a card sheet saying, "You are an elf who has passed through Moria." I thought, this is the coolest thing ever. Played for like an hour or so, thought that was the best thing ever, and then spent about 2 years, because this is pre-internet, trying to find out exactly what I'd played. I found what I thought was the right game, but actually turned out to be this incredibly complicated like 1980s war game, and spent months trying to work out how this like complicated war game with like dozens of dice and figures and movement rules could be mapped to the thing I had played in the library, where you said what you wanted to do and did it, and it was great. And then finally I worked out and got a copy of Redbox D&D and went from there.
And so what time was this? What?
It would have been 1989 or 90.
My mother-in-law's a proud person from Cork, and we used to visit Cork quite a bit in the 90s to visit my wife's granny. She used to live in Crosshaven near Carrigaline.
I know it well.
I didn't get the sense in around there that there was a particularly strong presence of gaming. You couldn't find D&D in Eason's, for example. So,
don't talk about the D&D in Eason's. Because when I finally got into gaming, Eason's had briefly a corner of D&D and MERP stuff. And when I found out what I wanted to do, I went in, bought some of it, saved it with pocket money, was going to go in the next day and buy pretty much all of it. And that week, they got rid of their section. I'm still bitter about that, far more than 20 years later.
So how did you get hold of games?
There was this is of fascinating interest to any Corkonians, but obscure to anyone else. There was a bookshop called Collins Bookshop, and upstairs, next to the ancient alien Von Daniken stuff and the Summon Your Sacred Healing Angel books, there was a shelf of role-playing books, and it was a fairly sort of eclectic collection. Like, I remember the first D&D book I ever bought, other than the box set, was the first edition Manual of the Planes. You're the one with the Astral Devourer, Astral Dreadnought thing on the cover. You're fantastic, but absolutely incomprehensible if your only reference is the basic D&D red box set, because you're trying to map spells in that book to spells mentioned in the Manual of the Planes, and trying to reconcile it all. So yeah, it was like sort of trying to work out how D&D worked through sort of broken window, because I didn't have a full grasp of the whole thing.
And who were you playing with by then? So who was your group?
Oh, I dragged in school friends and picked up a copy of the old Fighting Fantasy role-playing game. At one point, I was running that for them, and then D&D. And then when we sort of hit 15, we discovered Vampire, and that was it for a while.
And when did you discover Call of Cthulhu? Because clearly that's had an influence on what you write now. So
there's a local gaming convention, WarpCon, which I was heavily involved in. Still am. I've gone to for every year for many, many years. But the first year I went to that in 1994, the only games I played at that point were D&D and D&D-esque things. So that was the first convention where I discovered Paranoia, but also the first convention where I discovered Cthulhu. So it was a massively formative experience for me, given they're two of the things I'm most associated with. I recall absolutely fantastic Call of Cthulhu scenario. We were all priests trying to solve the mystery of why one of our fellow students in the seminary had vanished. I've been searching for a copy of that scenario for years, just so I can sort of try and see what was actually going on. Because again, I only saw part of it. I really wanted to find out what the actual story was, because we got nowhere in it. But that was sort of a revelation that games didn't have to be about swords and sorcery and dungeons.
Did you play any long form campaigns?
After the convention, I grabbed a copy of Call of Cthulhu, and we played that for a few years. Then we never played any of the great campaigns of Cthulhu. I've played through Horror on the Orient Express, but that was much later. We were just running basically everything from the various Cthulhu anthologies, like the Great Old Ones and I think Fearful Experiments and so forth. Basically, whatever books we could get our hands on, we ran through.
You mentioned WarpCon, so is there a lively convention culture in Ireland?
There are a couple of moderately big conventions, GaelCon in Dublin and WarpCon in Cork being the two largest ones. There are lots then of smaller conventions, and I'm probably going to throw the wrath of someone here by calling their con a smaller con, given Leprechaun's quite large, and QCon in Belfast is bigger than all of them, but that's because it's sort of embraced anime. Early 2000s, back in sort of my college days, you could go to a convention at least once a month, and you could easily do 2 or 3 a month. There were lots of small college cons and local cons. There was a sort of travelling convention circuit of people who would go to most of them.
And so how did you make the transition from a player to an author, a designer?
Again, through conventions, really. The Irish con system evolved over time, but back when I was involved, was weirdly based on the RPGA system. So basically, instead of a GM turning up to a con and running their game, a GM would go to the con and be given and sign up to say, I'll run Call of Cthulhu. And then all the GMs running Cthulhu would be running the same scenario at the same time. So you have sort of tournament style set up there. And that meant that the whatever scenarios you run at the con for a particular game had to be written up in considerable detail and to a quasi-professional standard, as you needed pre-gens, you needed detailed notes that a GM could just pick up and run with 2 minutes notice. So I wrote a lot of those games, mainly actually Cthulhu and so forth. And because they were so detailed and ready to pick up and run, there was a site called irishgaming.com, which I think is gone now, which archived them all. And when I got the internet and was on various mailing lists, I would point at my scenarios going, here, look at this. If you want a Blue Planet scenario, go here. I've got five of them for download. That picked up some attention from Fantasy Flight, who were doing Blue Planet at that point, and they offered me a little bit of freelancing. And I sort of went from there, getting freelancing gigs along the way. And then finally the computer job I was working in went away. And I thought, well, give this writing thing a try until I run out of money. And I haven't run out of money yet.
Long may you continue. What came to my attention was the stuff you did for Mongoose, which is reviving some of those classic games from the 80s.
Well, Mongoose started out as a D20 supplement company back in the D20 boom. At the time, they were hiring loads of writers, so I signed up with them and got a full-time job with them, which came in very handy, because the money at that point was being run out. After a while, once the sort of initial D20 Frenzy started fading away, they started basically reviving old games, and I ended up redoing Traveller for them, and also doing an adaptation of Hawkmoon for their revival of RuneQuest. In both cases, it was very much trying to sort of recall as much as I could of the sort of 80s nostalgia and try to basically sort of bring the games back to sort of their roots while still modernizing them a little bit.
Well, I've played your version of Traveller, and I have to say that it's a version that, and I'm going to offend some people now, that makes it playable. You do a really good job of capturing the essence of Traveller and its world, but giving mechanics that are accessible and playable.
Thank you very much. That was the brief and the idea. Reviving old games is a kind of a tricky prospect. You've got to sort of be a sort of respectful custodian of the established fan base and people who've been playing it for years, because I mean they're the ones who have a great sense of ownership of the game. But you also need to appeal to new gamers. You need to basically identify the bits of the classic game that are sort of easy ins and focus on those without disturbing the massively established canon of facts. And then there are a couple of sort of sacred cows that have to be killed.
And so when you were faced with the with Traveller, what was the sacred cow that you felt needed to go?
Traveller was a kind of a weird case in that they were doing Traveller 5 at the same time, so I had to keep that in mind at the same time, even though that didn't actually exist yet, and I had very little idea of what it was going to be. I think the main thing for Traveller was just sort of making the skill system feel a bit more like other games, because the original classic Traveller had a fairly idiosyncratic skill system where each skill worked slightly differently. There was no sort of single unified mechanic, and the number of skills a character had would vary wildly. You could have a character who had one level in Vac-Suit, and that was their entire skill base, where someone else had a dozen skills in various things. So basically, was trying to achieve some level of party balance and baseline competence.
Starship combat becomes more playable. I'm not very good at logarithms, but better at story. And I think the Starship combat system that you put in your version of Traveller makes it more fun. Less with protractors.
Yeah, I mean, I will admit that's less strictly realistic, but it is a lot more approachable for those who aren't into their log tables and their Newtonian physics.
That's great. Well, I'm afraid I still couldn't make the bureaucracy planet in the Traveller Adventure any fun.
Yeah. Traveller Adventures are a whole other ballgame. I mean, I modernized some of those, and there are some absolutely great ones out there. And there are some others that... What's the diplomatic way to put this? Adventure writing is an art. It's like it's like cinematography or screenwriting or something. It has evolved over time, and we have seen things that work and things that don't work. So some of the early ones do meander around doing things that don't work very well.
Well, we may return to the idea of adventure writing as an art, but I didn't want to let Hawkmoon pass. So, what are the challenges with that project?
How it came about is that Mongoose got the license and said, "Gar, write this," and I went, "Okay," and ran off and hastily read all the Hawkmoon books I could find.
Right. So, you see, we have a bit of an ongoing debate on the podcast between the Moorcocks and the Tolkiens. So, would you say you're firmly in the Tolkien pack?
Yeah, I mean, I like some Moorcock stuff. I quite enjoyed working on Hawkmoon. I think he is a sort of fascinating figure in the history of fantasy. But yeah, I'm not. Again, I'm just being diplomatic there.
Yeah, there's no need to be diplomatic.
There's always need to be diplomatic.
So it's a case of just cramming all those books and reading the Hawkmoon books. And how do you make something like a literary world gameable?
It was very much a case of cramming all the Hawkmoon books and reading whatever of the old Chaosium supplements I could find, and seeing as I don't actually speak French, trying to work out what the French Hawkmoon line was like through Google Translate and so forth. And owing to a schedule screw up, I did an awful lot of that while sitting on a boat on the Great Barrier Reef between scuba diving lessons, which was one of the more surreal work moments. I thought I had free time on my schedule, and Mongoose disagreed, so I ended up having to combine the two. But yeah, I spent more time reading into the licensing issues regarding Hawkmoon than Moore spent writing Hawkmoon, given that he famously wrote some of them in a weekend. As far as adaptation goes, the key is basically finding out what a group of player characters might do, what sort of characters they might be, and zeroing in on the parts of the setting that give them gameable stuff to do. S. John Ross, who's a fantastic writer, has this list of sort of rules for how a role-playing game setting works. Cliché, combat, fellowship, anarchy, and enigma.
Huh.
Basically, cliché, it needs to be accessible. It needs to basically be familiar enough that players can riff on it and absorb it easily and do tons of background research. Combat, there needs to be basically action and things to do. Fellowship, you need a group of ex-player characters wandering around doing things. Anarchy, they need to be the ones pretty much in charge. You can't. It's hard to do a viable military style or heavily hierarchical game where either they're getting orders they have to execute to the letter, or one player character is in charge and everyone else has to obey what they say. And Enigma, there has to be stuff to investigate and mysteries to solve. And basically, I would often use those 5 things as a guide when trying to adapt a literary or TV series, whatever, into a role-playing game.
And I guess the other element is ability to not be precious about the setting as well, isn't it? To feel that you can interact with it without destroying it. And I think that's sometimes a challenge, isn't it, with taking up a literary setting or an established setting like Glorantha, for example.
Yeah, you need to sort of identify what bits people will not tolerate you messing with. With Lord of the Rings or something, you have to sort of you can't really do a game where you're replacing the Fellowship or where Sauron can be defeated by someone else. Or certainly in Star Wars, your core setting can't be you're the guys who killed Darth Vader, because the players, people who come to the setting, loving the setting first and the game second, are attached to those existing elements very strongly. So you need to find other places in the setting where you can have action and anarchy and the players doing stuff that sort of fits in with the established canon without contradicting it. So basically, sort of find the fuzzy areas and sort of the ill-defined areas, and sort of making your home there while echoing the interesting elements from the established setting.
What strikes me about your writing style and your ability, and as you say, the art of your adventure writing, is you're very good at finding the core elements of what makes something work. Where does that come from? Is that just a wisdom through years of playing, or how do you get to the very essence of what's important?
I think possibly it's because of background writing convention games. Because in a convention game, if you don't know what the players that are coming and you don't know how familiar they are with the particular setting, you learn to sort of foreground the cool things of that setting in these adventures, while still knowing that the players might equally be long-term veterans who want to put an interesting twist on it. So if you're running a Cthulhu game, then you want to have foreground investigating stuff, cool handouts, interesting clues to follow, cults and monsters at the end, and madness and horror. But you also want to entertain the Cthulhu Grognards, so you want to basically have interesting twists on all those things. So you end up sort of boiling a setting down, or a game down, to its core activities or core loops, and then putting spins on those to make them shiny and new to veteran players.
What is it about Gumshoe that you find attractive to work with?
Gumshoe is fantastic clarifying for an adventure writer. How Gumshoe works is it assumes that the players will always get the clue they need to move on to the next scene. There's never a question that you'll miss a spot check, or that the players will misinterpret a clue and they'll go off in the wrong direction. It'll always it gives you a sort of connective structure that you can rely on. And that means you can do more intricate scenarios, because you know that the players will definitely spot clues A, B, C. So you know that scenes ABC will happen in some order next after the first scene, which basically means you need to put in less backup. You have there's less error collection involved. You know the players are going to be able to move on, so you can sort of focus on the story and the mystery more than other games. Because it gives you great confidence as a writer.
So for people who haven't played Night's Black Agents, how would you pitch that to them?
The classic pitch is Jason Bourne versus vampires. You are a elite former spy, and you discover that vampires exist, and you go off hunting them. And there is this elaborate system called the Conspiramid, which basically tracks your progress against the vampires' evil conspiracy, and you shoot your way up it, beating up bad guys.
Of course, one of the adventures that you've written with Kenneth Hite is the Dracula dossier, which the way that's presented is very different, isn't it, from that kind of scene by scene approach? That's very much I don't like using this word, but a sandbox, isn't it? So this is everything, and it'll change depending how you find your way through it. So
it is and it isn't. I mean, Dracula is a complete sort of sandbox / toolkit approach where we haven't broken up as adventure. We've got here's a list of NPCs, here's a list of locations, here's a list of items, but the key is there are then connections between them. And because of how Gumshoe works, we always find the clue. You can rely on if the players go and find this the Le Dragon Noir, the spellbook. You can go, okay, they have the spellbook. Here's a list of connections and the associated clues. So if they use research to try and find out where this book came from, it'll point at this librarian, and that librarian is written up as a character. And when they go to talk to that librarian, you read through it, and one of the options is that this librarian has been hypnotized by a vampire. Here's the clue that will discover that. Here's the connections to that vampire. But you know that each thing in the book will lead to something else. So unless the GM wants to put in a dead end or red herring, everything will keep moving through the web of clues all the way up to Dracula.
So Dracula dossier is a few years ago now, isn't it? This is the big campaign pack where essentially Dracula is being weaponized by various forces as an agent at different time scales. So how did that come about? Just describe the process of working with Ken on that project.
The original idea was Ken's. There's a book called The Case for the UFO or The Hunt for the UFO or something. It was basically this 1960s UFO weirdness book. But there's a famous edition of that was mysteriously annotated by possible aliens in the margins and sent into some Air Force base. The Varro edition it's called, as far as I can recall. And that was the inspiration for having a copy of Dracula with annotations in the margins, and that points to clues. And Ken came up with that idea, and also the sort of basic framework of having 4 different time periods: 1894, World War II, the 1970s, and now. And that was mainly inspired by Romanian earthquakes, because we had this whole connection of Dracula and earthquakes. And once we had that framework, it was really a question of writing up basically potential things the characters could investigate, following clues ourselves in Dracula and in Stoker's works and in history.
Ken's approach seems to be a minefield of ideas and making connections and great encyclopedic knowledge. How do you boil that down? How do you grab onto that and turn it into an adventure?
With any idea, you have to sort of sit down and go, okay, how do the players interact with this? What dangers might they encounter? What clues can they poke out of it? How will that sort of play when it hits the table? And it's a question of sort of sitting down, imagining an average group of players faced with that particular clue, trying to which sort of gamers would that appeal to? The gamer who absolutely loves history and has encyclopedic knowledge of 1970s spy lore, they're fine. They will absolutely love this. Another hypothetical player who's not really into spy fiction is playing the game because they're playing with their friends. They like combat. How can I stick in a period-appropriate atmospheric combat into the scene what bad guy can connect this to give them a fight scene. Basically, how will this play at the table is the question I keep asking.
And how does that collaboration process work? Because obviously you've got the transatlantic difference, so how does it generate? Are you on Skype often? Or?
Yeah, for Dracula Dossier, we were pretty much constantly on Skype, passing things back and forth, and basically crowing at each other about obscure discoveries. Like I remember being very, very proud to work out that the time shift that we'd made to the book, basically to line it up with earthquakes, we'd basically move half the events of Dracula 6 months later, which meant that Lucy Westenra dies on Friday the 13th, which I thought was the best thing ever.
Brilliant.
But with any historical thing, once you start digging in, it gets spooky because you will you'll identify all these connections and all these parallels, and just historical research will do half the writing for you, which is always a fun thing.
And I know that you've run the Dracula Dossier, the full campaign over a weekend. So how did that go?
That went really, really well. I was very happy with how it went. Basically, at ScaleCon, we ran 3-hour sessions of the campaign with a sort of a group of players who heroically signed up for it for a 2-day con. With that one, basically, what I did was I highlighted a couple of clues that I knew that I'd sort of stuff prepared for. The secret sauce of Dracula Dossier is the conspiramid, which is the framework, as I said, of the bad guy's conspiracy. You map the sort of web of clues from the Dossier book, which is a smorgasbord of NPCs and characters and locations, onto that pyramid. At the top of the pyramid, you've got Dracula, and you move up the layers of the pyramid, slotting in things from the book. So if you slot in this informant at level 1, he's working for the conspiracy on the street level. You beat him up, he points to this chemical firm, that gets slotted in level 2. So even though the sort of massive web of clues doesn't have much of a structure, when you sort of plug it into the pyramid, you're getting closer and closer to Dracula. So it was able to pace the game so that over the 5 sessions, they got closer and closer to the center of the conspiracy, closer and closer to Dracula. So it came out as a satisfying experience over those 5 sessions.
And I understand that you actually used an iPhone as a prop, as a handout.
Yeah, basically, I got one of my old phones and wrote a couple of notes in the Notes app, and basically gave the players a backpack with the copy of Dracula, maps, a couple of other handout pages, and the phone. And once they finally worked out they could unlock the phone, there's more stuff in here.
Brilliant. At the time of us recording this, I'm about to go to UK Games Expo, and tomorrow afternoon I'm running a game of Knights Black Agents.
Excellent. Good choice.
And what tips would you give me?
Remember that the players the player characters are supposed to be both extremely competent, but also up against superhuman foes. Give them their chance to shine. They're never going to be sort of screw something up, but they're up against creatures that can't be defeated by basically bullets or gunfire. Always give them the core clues in a scene. Make sure they're never stalled or stuck on what to do next. But at the same time, give them a choice of things to do next. Trying to avoid a railroaded scenario to a degree. I mean, it's con games, so a degree of sort of forward pressure is inevitable. Give them. There are quick reference sheets at the back of the Let's Play Agents book for the various thriller combat options. Photocopy those, have them available to the players, because if they want to do sort of cool martial arts maneuvers, there are rules for that. And the Let's Play Agents combat system isn't that complicated, but there are lots of basically sort of player triggered options where you've got to spend extra points to do X, and make sure they're aware of those, even if you don't sort of highlight them too much.
One of the things I found playing the game is I like it because it's very light on its feet, and you can get the action moving. It's sometimes I found that there's players who buy into that, and there's players who find it difficult because they're used to a ponderous investigation where they've got time to think. People who are thinking quickly, and those who are trying to analyse everything.
Yeah, you got the whole sort of Smiley versus Bourne effect there.
Yes.
Because some companies do want to play that sort of intellectual, slowly methodically work through things. Basically, modulate your downtimes. occasionally have the bad guys show up and attack, or given sort of a sort of espionage horror game, you can like get a great reaction of the players, but just have like shadows outside the window, bats beating against the glass, cars slowing down as they pass the character's safe house. Going, how long is that car being parked there? Is there someone there? Don't let the more sort of cerebral players settle for too long. Give them a chance to think, but then sort of chivvy them along to the next action scene.
Yeah, because I have had scenes where they've been faced with a Renfield with a AK-47, and they're still trying to work out what's going on.
The other thing is, tell them that in Let's Play Agents, you get information from action. That the point of finding a clue is the clue will point you towards somewhere dangerous. You'll experience danger there, and you will get more clues. That if they try to work out what's going on, and they're Renfield shooting at them, if they take down the Renfield, they will find another clue. They'll interrogate him, or he will have a phone they can analyze with traffic analysis. The prisoner who's tied up in the back of his car will go, I've been captured, and I'm going to sacrifice the vampires. They were going to take me to this warehouse near the airport. That's the next clue the players need. But to tell them basically that getting shot at is a reward for finding clues, and that once they finish getting shot at, they will find more clues they can slot into their theory of the case.
You're right when you say that, and the Dracula dossier is a great resource, and using that conspyramid is great, because that's how I've constructed the adventure. So I've taken the setting of 1984. So I've said that the former Edom agents are trying to shut down the mines in the UK. So it's the backdrop of the 1984 miners' strike, and there are forces where they're trying to get the mines closed because of the telluric powers that are they want to take control of the vampires, because Orlok is somewhere in the UK and they're trying to locate him.
Excellent.
So what I found fascinating is the way that players can find their way through the Dracula dossier in different ways.
I mean, Dracula dossier is a sort of a huge and weird campaign, and it does need the pyramid structure to sort of keep it focused. Otherwise, you'd be sort of like circling around Dracula for ages, ever getting closer to the big answers.
So that was a few years ago now. So what's the plans for Night's Black Agents going forward?
There are 2 books currently in the pipeline that are both written. There is the Persephone Extraction, which is an anthology or a sort of mini campaign of 5 adventures. Basically the first one in Paris and the last one in Greece are sort of the start and end point, and the other 3 could be played in any order, so you've got some degree of freedom in the campaign. And that's basically about these vampires based on the shades in Greek myth. So they're these ancient, withered, ghostly things who basically become more solid and stronger when they drink blood, and that's basically running around Europe trying to thwart their apocalyptic plans. The other thing we've done is, it was called Solo up until quite recently, but apparently there's some other movie or something with that title. So I think it's currently called Solo Ops. Although when I handed in the manuscript last week, it was like a currently untitled vampire game. That is the adaptation of the Gumshoe 1-to-1 system to Night's Black Agents. So It's for one player, one GM, and instead of having a group of heroic badass spies hunting vampires, you have one single heroic badass spy hunting the vampires.
And will that be similar to Cthulhu Confidential? Will that have some pre-generated characters for you to use?
It'll have one pre-generated character, Layla Khan. Basically, because Night's Black Agents is really aimed towards campaigns more than other games. Like in Cthulhu is very easy for sort of one-shot scenarios, because it's basically all about the monster or the cult, whatever. There is some small, relatively self-contained instance of the mythos. You go off and thwart that cosmic danger, and everything turns normal. Night's Black Agents is all about fighting your way up the pyramid. Vampires at the top. They've got this epic conspiracy of criminals and spies and monsters beneath them. You've got to basically work your way through. So for Solo Ops, you have three semi-linked adventures where you're basically fighting against different parts of the conspiracy. getting closer and closer to revenge on the vampires. So basically,
that sounds great. So, have you got a publication schedule for that? Is that coming soon?
It's only in playtesting as of today. So I think October was the current estimate, but that is a very, very, very loose estimate and will depend on how it starts contact with playtesters and revisions and so forth. So hopefully this year. Whereas Persephone, I think, is out for Gen Con, but I won't swear to it.
Great that the lines are continuing, because I do think it's a fantastic game. And before you go, I need to make a pitch of my own, because I think we need to get this Moorcock versus Tolkien issue resolved. I'm going to pitch a game. You don't have to give me an answer now, but I'm thinking a Tolkien versus Moorcock mashup. Elrond versus Elric. I'll leave that with you.
I'm now just trying to map Melnibone onto Numenor, and like, so you both of this island of ancient, powerful, elf-associated people. I'm wondering how that would work. To generate Numenorians. Anyway.
Well, my rates are good. I'll just have 5 points on anything on that. That's fine. I'll leave that with you.
Excellent.
Okay. Thank you very much for spending the time with us, Gareth. It's been very illuminating, and it's been great. Thank you very much.
Oh, it's been fun to sort of go down nostalgic byways and think about games of yore.
Thank you.
Actual play.
There's trouble brewing for Hawkeye on BBC Two in a moment when a goat devours the camp payroll in tonight's story from MASH. And here on One Now, the 9 o'clock news with John Humphreys.
McGregor's message to the miners: go back to work, I won't give in. But Scargill says we fight on.
I will never negotiate with people who use coercion and violence to achieve their objective. They are the enemies of democracy. They are not interested in the future of democracy. They are trying to kill democracy for their own purposes.
Leeds, England, the summer of 1984. The industrial dispute between the National Union of Miners and the National Coal Board has been in deadlock for months. There's been violent confrontation between the Yorkshire miners and the police. The courts have sequestered the union's assets. The Secretary of State for Trade and Industry has sanctioned the use of freelance, deniable agents for counter-subversion operations. The MI5's resources are stretched in Northern Ireland and security ops related to the dispute. The sky is steel grey as the agents meet in an abandoned coking plant, sitting on overturned boxes with an overflowing ashtray in the centre of the room. Mr. Hans is standing at a blackboard, preparing to brief the agents after they've done their introductions.
Harry Reeves, ex-Navy, ex-MI6, now freelance, doing dirty work for the government. The dogs, bit of that Cockney stuff. Speak a few languages, but I can make my Cockney accent disappear. I can do a really good Yorkshire. Surveillance is my thing.
All right, I'm Jimmy. I was in the traffic cops, but I expanded out a bit. It was a bit of a tough time, but done with the cops now, and I'm freelancing. Driving's my speciality. There's not a car I can't start and not a car I can't drive.
Yeah, I'm ex-MI6, involved in surveillance, intelligence, supporting the army in Falklands. Got discharged after that.
Yeah, so Adam's from the mean streets of Hackney. He's a boxman, so he's an intrusion expert, breaking into newspaper offices, corporations, etc., Digging the Dirt. You might recognise him recently on the TV because he was featured, his face at least was featured in a TV documentary about a famous break-in at a newspaper tycoon's office. So he's lying low at the moment because his face is out there.
Okay, listen carefully. Your mark is Frank Holton. He pins a photograph onto the blackboard. He's the treasurer for a local branch of the NUM, and he set up a meeting with Vladimir Kurtz, the leader of the Kurbas Union of Workers, who've been donating their rubles to support their comrades in the UK. Only Kurtz is not as he seems. We believe he's a GRU operative who's been on active measures and seems to want something in exchange for his financial assistance. The USSR have strategic interests in this dispute, but this seems to be something personal for Vladimir. The meeting's taking place in the Victoria Suite of the Metropole Hotel in the centre of Leeds. You need to find out what's happening and have the mandate to intercept and disrupt Kurtz's intervention through any means possible. Any reasonable means. But you need to act quickly. The meeting's taking place in 50 minutes.
Have we got a car?
What kind of car would you like?
Well, part of me would love nice chocolate brown Austin and Allegro just because that's what we had when I was a kid. But then a Jensen Interceptor might be.
Well, surely we want a nice Capri.
Oh, Capri.
Oh, yeah.
Tobacco-coloured Capri.
Yeah, a bit of a squeeze, but we can all fit in. Yeah.
I'll say that you're all mic'd up as well, so you can communicate to each other if you want to split up.
I was just going to check in the back of my car, in the back of the Capri, rummage through my bag, and I think I have some phone taps in there.
Okay.
I wondered if we could get through the door, pop a phone tap in.
So we could try and book the room next door, the room above.
Well, that's what's known as preparedness. So as you rummage around in the back of the car, you've got to roll over a 3 to say whether you've got it or not. But you can spend some of your points to increase the chance of you having some phone taps. If
I spend some points, I'm preparedness points, aren't I? That would be the ideal skill for having, rummaging and pulling thing out of thin air. So if I spend 2 points,
yeah,
that we're guaranteed it, aren't we? Unless it's a roll of 1.
Yeah, you've got it.
Come on, Jimmy, get us there ASAP.
All right, let's go.
It's a busy Saturday afternoon. Jimmy knows back roads, which might be useful later. The Hotel Metropole is a big mock Gothic hotel in the centre of town with lots of people congregating. It looks like there's some kind of convention taking place. It looks like some kind of board games convention. There's various teenagers in jeans and heavy metal t-shirts gathering around the lobby. Where are you parking, Jimmy?
Is there a car park round the back, like a goods entrance round there, perhaps?
Behind it, there's a place where deliveries are accepted.
Okay, some of us need to get up to the room, and someone needs to go to the front desk and get a booking.
Victoria Suite is at the very top of the building.
Angus, are you thinking that if you were underneath, that you'd sort of like drill up and just put a...
No, because if you've got the bug in the phone in the room, we'll just be underneath the room, won't we, with our little transistor receiver.
So you don't have to physically.
No.
Should we phone the room first to make sure we're not there?
You could ask at the front desk to phone. We know his name. Just ask if you could page him.
Have you got any skills that could help with that?
I've got flirting. Who can tell?
Go flirt with a bird on reception and see if you could get her to tell you.
I do indeed flirt with the bird on reception to see whether I can to see whether my old mate is there or whether he's out doing mischief.
She explains that she's got into trouble for this kind of thing before.
Oh, I bet you have, darling. And I can tell by your face that you're not one to follow rules either.
She says that the Victoria Suite isn't occupied, but it is planned on people arriving very shortly.
Well, fantastic. That's great. That's all I need to know. And we'll catch up later, yeah?
Let's do that. She gives you her number and a time when she's knocking off.
All right, don't milk it. Okay.
We need to get into the room.
Yeah, so my cherry is breaking all locks. So if I do the lock, then John can plant the bug.
Okay.
Delightful carpets.
So Ian, shall I watch the stairs to make sure we don't have any visitors? Yeah.
Oh, are we in?
Yeah.
This is 1980, just a credit card.
Yeah, you just slide a card, an access card, down the inside.
Your wobbly friend.
Yeah.
Flexible friend.
Flexible friend, yeah.
Okay, so you're in the room.
Right. Oh, crumbs. We're going to need more than one bug. Have I got more than one or just one?
You've just got one at the moment.
Surely they'll only chat in that on those sofas. You need to be on the table. You need to be somewhere between the two, or for a light fitting, or the phone or something. That should get it.
So they're either going to be sitting on the comfy sofas or around the
table.
Around the table around here.
There's a desk, isn't there?
And there's a desk there. Maybe if I put it on this light here.
Meanwhile,
do I need to roll for something?
Meanwhile, in the lobby, walking through the crowd of nerds that are gathering in the lobby, you see this guy, and he must be about 7 foot tall with a bald head, with one white eye, who comes striding in, and
Cyclops.
He's and quite an imposing figure, and goes to the reception.
As we're in reception, I'll go, go on, John, chop. Targets here, or whatever they. Are we talking into our armpits like this? like another Benson and Hedges. Targets here.
He goes to the reception and he picks up the keys and starts making his way to the elevator or the lift.
Is there only? You could maybe get him to join a sort of a pick-up chivalry and sorcery game on the way up.
Yeah.
Well, if he's going up in the lift, you can go down the stairs with impunity. I just thought he'll be none the wiser.
Have the boys got the bug in then?
Yeah. So John, where are you putting the bug?
Just in that lamp there.
What, we were in the lift with him? Can't get any conversation out of him at all.
No.
So are you in with these lot doing this board game thing? I think they're all playing Monopoly.
He just smiles and nods. You look at his hands. His hands are like shovels, dirt ingrained in his nails.
What's he dressed like otherwise? Is he fairly normally dressed?
In a blazer and in a business suit.
Okay, well, when it gets to my floor, which was going to be 5, I think I'll get out.
So, are you getting out of there, John?
What do you want to do? Do you want to go straight into that booked room and turn it on and see
if it works?
Yeah, and I'll say something in the room and you can pick it up.
We can't. You need to be out there, and we'll hear him surely moving and shuffling around.
He's come up to the 7th floor and he's in the corridor. Where are you, John?
Well, I've planted the plug and I'm going out now.
You're out.
So I need to leave the room.
Well, should I go down to the lobby as the driver if we need to make a sharp exit?
You get a car ready. Yeah, that's a good idea.
Yeah.
Jimmy driver.
Right. I'll go down to the lobby then, Lee.
So are we all wearing sort of leather jackets and polo necks? Sort of beige leather jackets and polo necks?
Yeah. When you go down to the lobby, Jimmy, you notice that there is a nervous-looking Frank Holton enter the place, and underneath his arm, he's got this file.
Is he alone, presumably?
He is alone, yeah. He's clutching this file very closely. It attracts your interest.
I'll radio up to the guys in the room that Bagpuss has awoken, or whatever code name you want to use. And he's carrying something from the mouse organ.
Gabriel, message received.
As you leave the room, John, and up on that, you see this guy stride past, and he mutters hello in some with a very heavy Eastern accent.
So, sorry, he hasn't seen us leave the room. He's just seen us in the corridor. Is that right?
Yeah.
So I'm setting up in floor 5 with the receiver, trying to tune it in.
But so, just so I know, is this weird guy seen all 4 of us?
So he's seen all 4 of us?
Yeah.
That won't be a problem, I'm sure.
It's only got one eye.
Down in the lobby, you can see that Halton has got into the lift and he's making his way to the 7th floor.
So I assume Jimmy's trailing him now.
Are you trailing him, Jimmy?
What do you reckon, Hodder?
Hang tight just in case we have to make a sharp exit.
Yeah, if he's going up in the lift, I'll warn the guys that he's on his way up.
On the way.
Can I just sort of throw in a suggestion? It may be mad. So, do you think we should stop this guy? Do you think he's a victim in this, and we should bring him onto our side rather than let him go in there?
Well, our orders are just to listen in and find out what's going on, rather than try to convert him. That's what we've been paid to do.
Does he seem scared more than nervous?
He looks very anxious. He looks he looks scared. He looks anxious.
It just, I suppose, Adam's moral whatever compass is twanging, but you're right. It is the mission, but this guy looks like he's in trouble.
Yeah, well, that's not our problem. We just need to get the intel and get out. So let's get this. Let's get the old reel-to-reel cracked open on the bed, and let's see if we can see if the bug's working. Come on, John, do your magic. Get the old transmitter tuned in.
Okay. The cat's whisker.
I'm going to say that because you're a floor down, that this is going to be a difficulty rating 7.
Yeah, but we could if we adjust the squelch setting on the using my electronic surveillance. If we adjust the squelch setting on the receiver, we should be able to take out some of the interference of the building, which is going to be less because we're still only going through floorboards rather than the steel frame structure of that wall.
I'll knock it down to 5.
3 points of surveillance on it, and have a go.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Okay, I've got 3 points on that. Shall I roll a d6, yeah?
Yeah.
I've got 6.
6. And you hear a knock on the door. And he shuffles over.
Press play and record on the reel-to-reel.
They exchange pleasantries, but it's quite clear that Halton is nervous about this situation.
Did you say the other guy has a Eastern European accent?
Yeah.
Being MI6, working with the Eastern Bloc regularly, can I get any twang from his accent to pick up a general region? Is he Hungarian, Polish, or is it just sort of
Romanian? And it sounds like he is a miner, and he starts talking about brotherhood and solidarity.
He's banging his head in those tunnels at 740. I wonder as he leaves if we should jump him and nick his folder.
Yeah.
We could just filch it. I've got filch.
Have you?
Yeah.
Yeah,
why don't
I've got filch as well if necessary.
As
Do
a
you mean
backup?
Do you mean like mug him? So not just take it off him.
Yeah.
This guy starts talking about. They seem to be wandering around the room. He feels anxious, and he starts talking to Halton about dark forces are in control of the mines in Romania, and they want control of the mines in the UK. Beware of the wolves; they're coming for you.
Does he sound? He sounds sympathetic. Well, he's not threatening. He's sort of warning.
Yeah. Harry, you've got some knowledge, haven't you?
I have some knowledge of the Eastern Europe, yes, and human terrain.
Human terrain.
Do I know what the wolves are? Have I heard them referred to before sometime in my past?
You're not quite sure, but you have heard of wolves in Romania. They're a gypsy, nomadic, gangster group that operate in Romania. That's a slang term for them.
Should we attempt to one of us attempt to get the dossier off or the file off Frank?
How important do you think is it that we do it without him knowing? Do you not think it matters? Do we have any value in interrogating him, or do you think that's sort of beyond mission?
Well, it's not actually the file we want. It's what's inside it. So we could just take it, grab the stuff out of it, and give it back to him.
There you go. That's what we need to do.
He goes on to start talking about energy, power. It's the energy power. And Halton's saying, what, you mean like gas, electric? And he says, no, dark power. They find a dark power.
It might be useful to the government to tap into for when the North Sea oil runs out.
Harry, have you got some background in the occult as well?
No, one.
Yeah. So you do have some knowledge, because you've got you've got some concerns about this, and you know that the Rivaris Segna, who are known as the Wolf Gypsies, they're a Roma clan that are native to Transylvania.
Just so I know, the rest of us don't have any knowledge or understanding or interest in the supernatural. It's all new to them. Is that right?
Yeah.
But Harry bangs on about it sometimes when he's pissed. Is that
yes.
right?
Yeah.
And he never walks under ladders.
Yeah. Does it sound like, in our smoke-filled room, huddled round this little speaker, Holton understands what's going on?
Not at all. Not at all. And then he starts talking about money, and he says that he's got the money, and the money will be delivered tomorrow in exchange for your gift.
Holton's giving him money.
No, Holton's receiving money from the vampire.
Two-
From the sorry.
2 million rubles.
Okay. Do we need to intercept that? Well, we need to get back to our handlers and tell them what's going on. Do they want us to intercept the cash, or do they want us to follow the money?
Maybe we need to trail this Transylvanian chap.
Oh, that's a good idea.
Jimmy, you suddenly become aware of 4 men in motorbike helmets, wearing black leather gilets, exposing heavily tattooed arms. They have long cases slung over their shoulders, barging through the entrance. 2 of them take the stairs, 2 take the lift. It looks like Frank and Vlad's meeting is going to be interrupted.
Hey, buddy. Want to go for a ride in my flying car?
Nah.
How about we go fly around with our jetpacks?
Nah. The future's just so boring.
Is the future boring you too? Well, maybe you should listen into the Save for Half podcast, the podcast about old school gaming, where we take a look at old gaming books with fresh eyes. You can find us at saveforhalf.com or on iTunes or around the corner. Perhaps we're standing behind you right now. Don't look.
Just Blythy rules. Welcome to the room of role-playing rambling. I have the man they call the Judge. We've spent some points on Streetwise, Network and Cover and secured this safe house so we can comfortably talk about Night Black Agents. Hello, Blythy.
Hello, Dirk.
Okay, here we go. So, we're going to talk about Night's Black Agents, but before we get into that, generally, here we are with Gumshoe. This is a character sheet that's presenting you with a list of skills that's not expressed as a percentage or pluses.
Absolutely, yeah. Yes. Thank God.
How does that feel?
I think when we first played it, we've played it a few times, haven't we? I think when we first played it, it was a little bit bewildering. We'll talk about spending points later, but spending points wasn't particularly bewildering. But the investigative skills thing was.
Yeah.
They're like rated 1 to 3, aren't they? They were a bit bewildering because you sort of think, what do I do with these? Because you don't roll and you don't necessarily spend, so you just kind of have investigative stroke academic kind of skills, don't you?
Yeah.
Which is, you do look at it and think, I'm not sure what I do with these.
See, I think this whole experience of starting to work with Gumshoe in Night's Black Agents is, it's like stretching muscles, isn't it? Stretching muscles that you didn't realise you had, and you can hear you can hear them pop and strain while you're doing it. But in the end, it feels quite rewarding. So this idea of having investigative abilities, where you are an expert, you're an expert in the field of archaeology, for example, and you can just do it. So
yeah, I think you're right, because I think we've played a few of these newfangled games, and, but Night's Black Agents, I think, was the first newfangled game we'd played.
It was,
I
yes,
think.
it was.
And we played Numenera, but I don't think that's that newfangled, really. Whereas this was. And you're right, it does stretch you a bit, because you realise how, for want of a better term, how lazy you become as a gamer, as a role player, because you're just used to things which are either roll over this, roll under that, pluses and minuses and percentages, and that's how all role playing games work. And it does present you with something different. I think the moment it clicked with me was when I realised that the investigative skills can be looked at as a hand of cards almost. So as if at certain points during the game you can play it. Like in a card game, you would play a card, right? This is the point in the game. I'm going to play this card, or I'm going to play that card. The investigative skills in Gumshoe feel like a hand of cards that you can play at certain points and say, right, at this point, I'm going to use this or use that. And that's the point at which it fell into place for me a little bit, I think.
And also, it's that thing, isn't it, where, as a magic user, for example, you may deploy a spell in a particularly tactical point in the plot to progress things or to send it off in a different direction. The application of the investigative skills has the same effect, doesn't it? It actually drives things forward in an interesting way. So part of the thing that you're doing as a player is thinking, how do I use this in the most effective way? I've got this array of abilities. How do I pick from this list the best thing to do at this particular point?
At first you look at it, and as I say, you have your lazy role player mind thinks, oh, this is hard work. This is new. I have to think about this. But eventually you think, actually, this is great, because it solves the problem. It solves the problem of investigation in games. There are these clues to be found, and yet no one's finding them because you're failing the rolls. Whereas in Gumshoe, you don't fail the roll, you find the clue.
I found as well that sensibility has infected some of the other games I've been running. So recently, as you know, we've been running Two-Headed Serpent using the Pope Cthulhu variant of the Call of Cthulhu rules. And I found myself saying things like, who's got the highest spot hidden roll? And just allowing those who've got the highest spot hidden to do it. So without a roll, you're the one who finds this.
Yeah, because you want us to do it, because it progresses the game.
Yeah.
There's no point saying everyone make a spot hidden roll and then we all fail. Yeah. And where does that leave you? Sometimes, and this has happened in games. We've done this a number of times. You fail the spot hidden, and then the games master will go, oh, well, I say you find it.
Yeah.
We've all done that. Oh, I'll say you find it.
Why is it that, I've spoken to a number of people in the Grog Squad who have got Night's Black Agents but have not run it. So what they've said to me is they find it a little daunting, a little off-putting. And it took me a little bit of time to just get into it, just to buy into some of the concepts, to grasp it. Because, as I say, it was stretching muscles that I didn't realise I had.
I think it's because it's actually at its heart, it's a very simple game. It's a dead simple mechanic, isn't it? Just rolling a d6 to do things. It's rolling a d6.
1d6.
Throw
the rest of your dice away, Blythy. Throw them away. I
don't like that. Throw them away. Aspect. That's the one aspect. Why couldn't it be a d8 or a d12? Put all d12 never gets used. Never gets used. The Thunderbird 3 of dice never gets used. But yeah, it's a 1d6. But I'll forgive it. I'll forgive it that. So it's quite a simple mechanic. I think the problem lies more with the investigative bit, because it's simple, but it's kind of a high concept, isn't it? It's almost like your gamer brain is looking for a bit more. to be there than there actually is, if that makes sense. You're looking for more, aren't you? But sometimes there isn't more there. It's straightforward, really.
And I've actually said that to people, that there's less to it than meets the eye, and
exactly, yeah.
And I think that sounds a terrible thing to say, but I don't mean that. I mean that in a way that I want to encourage people to play it, because on the face of it, it seems very complex, and you require this very esoteric knowledge about both the supernatural and about tradecraft. About how espionage works, how history works, and I think that's some of the baggage that surrounds Ken Hite and Robin D. Laws, isn't it? Some of that idea that you have to have this encyclopedic knowledge to even crack it, but it's not like that at all. And it has to be said that it's really good to read. You've got to remember that we're coming from the position where most of the books that we read back in the day were a bit like IKEA flat pack furniture instructions, where it just told you what to do. But this is like I don't know, a Robert Ludlum version of IKEA.
It reads like a novel, doesn't it?
It does.
It's as exciting as a novel to read. It's as exciting as a spy novel to read, even though it's actually a rule book. And it does fight. I think it does two things. I think on the one hand, and it's a really positive thing, is it fires you up to want to play espionage and espionage with vampires. I didn't, even if you didn't think you wanted to play it, I think by the time you read the rule book, you do.
Yes.
Because it does excite you. On the other hand, though, I think you're right. By doing that, it also can be a bit intimidating, because it's written by somebody who has such a kind of apparently fluid knowledge of tradecraft and spycraft and all this kind of stuff, that you think, oh, do I have to live up to that then as a games master? Yeah. And I think that's the bit you've got to, that's the wall you've got to get through. You've got to break through that wall of feeling this is really exciting, but it's written in a way that perhaps is intimidating, because I don't think my game will be as good as this rule book.
Yeah.
That's what it's like,
Yeah. And I think our message from today is have a crack at it, isn't it? So.
Yeah. And I think the other thing as well, which is along similar lines, is the investigative skills thing. You can have the three points on an investigative skill, can't you? One being you're an expert, two being you're a authority, and three, you're a kind of world authority on it, or famous for your knowledge on it. And you can spend some of those to get extra bits of information, can't you?
Yeah.
And I think if you were as a games master, that can be a bit intimidating, because you would think, okay, they found, I don't know, an old book, and I've got a clue. This old book has a clue. So they get that, and I know what that is. But then if someone starts to spend points to get more information, as a games master, you've got to provide more information.
Yeah.
Which might be a bit intimidating. It might be a little bit intimidating for some people, because you might think, well, I've got to come up with all new stuff now that I haven't prepared. I didn't think they'd do this.
Well,
and sound convincing about it.
I think we'll come back to that, but I think it's part of the paradox of this this game, isn't it? That on the one hand, it is about forward momentum, action, moving things on, but it's also about obfuscation,
potentially,
esoteric knowledge and difficulty. So on the one hand, it's got like a simple one-track approach of keep moving, keep going, keep moving along, but also have a lot of knowledge about all the things that are driving that and adding flavour to that. So I think we'll talk about that as we go through. So talk about the let's have a look at the areas of the rules that you think are significant and worth highlighting. So what are your three?
Well, I've got I'm not going to pick the investigative rule, even though I think that lies at the heart of it, doesn't it? We've talked about that. Just talked about that. I think the 3 rules are networks, heat, and chases. Chase rules.
Right, okay.
Networks, heat, and chases.
Okay. So let's have a look at... so what we should say, as well as the investigative rules, you have general abilities in Night's Black Agent. So these work a little bit differently, don't they? So these are a set of skills that you have points that you can vary the target result. So as you said, the target result on a D6 is usually 3 or 4. So you can, as a play character, can spend points to alter that result. So you you can favour things in your direction by knocking it down to a 1 if you want.
So you've got a pool of there's a kind of, the character sheet's predominantly investigative skills, but then on the right hand side you've got these cluster of more conventional skills like shooting stuff and doing stuff like that.
So talk about network and cover and how that works.
Well, networks and covers, again, this is a pool of points that you can spend during the game. And what's interesting about it, and I particularly like the network thing. So if you're in a city, for example, and as a player, you can use your network points to drop into the game people or places that provide support for you. So, a contact or something like that. So you might be in Paris chasing vampires, and you can spend some of your network points to say, well, I know a guy who owns a bar in and he's got a safe house upstairs, and he's quite well connected, and he's got his ear to the ground and that kind of thing. You can do that, but the interesting thing is, it's you as a player doing that. So it's not the games master saying, well, a guy who's got a bar in Paris. It's you as a player doing it to alter the game and alter the dynamic of the game. It gives the players a bit more agency and a bit more kind of creative input into the game.
Yeah, it does, and I think that's what struck us when we first started playing, isn't it? That kind of shift from the games master determining everything that was happening to you as players, that kind of balance moved across the table. I am a spy in the middle of this city. I need to build up my resources so that I can defeat the people who are against me.
Yeah, you're not just on your own. You've got the ability to develop a network of people and places to kind of support you, which is what Spy would have.
That was a lot of the fun when we were playing it. Was you riffing off some of the places that you found in the city.
It puts some of the work in the player's hands. So it's not just down to the games master to create a convincing setting. The players are doing it as well. Yeah. But I think when we played it, I think, is it a brothel or something? I said he knows a madam at a brothel in where were we? In Prague or somewhere like that. And of course, then you start to kind of develop that idea. So there's, like you said, there's a kind of riffing and to and fro between the players and the games master about that, and that takes a bit of pressure off the games master because your players are creating the setting as well.
Yeah, I still find it difficult to reconcile that idea that on the one hand it's an improvisational game that gives a lot of power to the players to shape the game they want, but on the other hand it is also very structured. It takes you down because of the investigative approach of you find this, and we'll talk a bit more about that. But that is the paradox of this game. That on the one hand, the players have it in their ability to create agency, but on the other hand, as a director, as a games master, you also have the ability to shape things. You know the way that it's going. You know what ultimately they're reaching. Okay, so what was next then?
Heat rule. Yeah, I like the heat rule. This as part of my homework for this podcast, I had to read the rules again, didn't I?
Yeah.
And I don't think I quite appreciated this rule when we played it because I was a player, not a game director, games master director. But when I read the rules, I think this is a really clever mechanic, because one of the problems in role-playing games, when they're set in a city or set in the real world, or even in a fantasy world in a city, players do things that they shouldn't do. So they kill people, they blow things up. And one of the problems you get as a games master, and I've had this problem, is how do you not punish players for it, but give players a sense that you can't go around killing people and not draw the attention of the authorities.
Yeah.
And that's true whether you're in Chicago, in playing Call of Cthulhu in Chicago, or you're RuneQuest in Pavis. You know, if you go around causing trouble, you're going to get the authorities looking at you. And the heat rule is that the more things you do like that, the more your heat score goes up. And that makes it difficult for you to keep a low profile. Things like crossing borders is difficult because essentially people are onto you. And there's a great list of points that you get for doing various things. So, you know, if you kill a civilian, heat point, you get heat points for that. You know, if you blow something up, you get heat points. So you get this accumulation of points. And it's clever because it takes that problem from the games master of how do you give players a sense of you're getting in trouble, and it makes it a mechanic, so it makes it part of the game, if you see what I mean. Yeah. So it's not necessarily down to the games master's judgment. It's something that the players know they're accumulating, and you as a games master know they're accumulating when they do things that are problematic. Having a gunfight in a hotel, you can't just walk away from it without any consequence.
And the other thing it does is that encourages you as a player to think creatively about you're going to invoke some of your general abilities to offset the heat. So, exactly. You know, yeah. I'm going to invest a few points in forgery for my passports, you know, because I know that if I get to this border crossing, that there's a level of heat on me, that what I've done in the previous country, they're going to be looking for me. They're going to have, you know, the border guards are going to have photographs up there of your character to look out for you. So
grainy shots from a CCTV camera of you shooting someone.
Yeah. So it does create that adrenaline, doesn't it, of crossing a border, but that sense of jeopardy, but also that thing that actually I feel fairly competent as a super spy that I'm going to get through this. Yes. So, you know, that is the remarkable balance of the game, I think, that on the one hand, you know, I'm good at this, but on the other hand, you know,
there are risks.
As I take more action, as I intervene more and have more of an impact on the world around me, therefore it's going to increasingly get more difficult.
Yeah, and it's a good rule because it makes it a mechanic. It makes it part of the rules. It's not just the games master's judgment.
Okay, and next up, what you've got there, the chase mechanic.
Yeah, Natural Occasion has a great chase mechanic. It's a bit, I don't know, would it be fair to say it's the most complicated bit of the game? Maybe.
It feels, initially...
It feels like it, doesn't it?
It does. It feels like a lot of crunch to do it, to deliver it. But I think the more you get adept at it, the more that you practice it, it's one of those things where you find that it really works. And we should say straight up that I've played this game more times than you have. So, you know, I've been in the new promiscuous world where I can play. I have an open relationship and play with more people.
We do now, we play with other people now, don't we?
Yeah.
We're okay about it as long as we're both playing with other people at the same time. That can open marriage where if one of us was out every night, it's piss the other one off. But as long as we're both out every night, it's okay.
It's all right, yeah. And as long as we don't talk about how much fun we've had with the other people.
As long as you don't fall in love with them. I think that's the thing. That's always the thing with this, isn't it? As long as you don't fall in love. with some other games master.
but what I found playing this more and more and getting more practice at it is that it's really good, because the handling of chases in RPGs is really difficult.
Yes.
But I think it deals with this really well. So the idea is that if you're running and using your athletics, general ability, you can spend on that. Or if you're driving, you spend on that. And the idea is that there's almost a secret ballot between the director and the player. So you start off with a track that you put on the table, so you can see the relative distance between the leader and the person who's in pursuit. And you can close that gap depending on a contest. And the contest is resolved by rolling on a d6, but on the level of spend. Level of spend that you put forward, level of spend that you put forward. So you write on a bit of paper, right, your opponent's going to put 2 points on this, or, as a player, you might put 1 point, and you're making that judgment whether you spend your resources to close the gap early on, or, keep some fuel in your tank and spend it later. So
and I think that's the crucial element of it, isn't it? That the secret spend, the fact that you spend your points in secret and then reveal to each other what you've spent, which cranks the tension up, because all chase mechanics that I've ever come across in an RPG tend to rely on dice rolls and pluses and minuses and percentages. So one of the problems with that is sometimes you'll know that you're going to get away, because you've got such a benefit or such a bonus over the opponent that's chasing you, or the person you're chasing, that it's going to work out the way you want to work it out, unless you're very, very unlucky. But the thing with Night's Block Agents is, because the spend is secret, you don't know whether somebody is going to, the person you're chasing or being chased by is going to spend lots of points and catch you, or whether you're going to spend lots of points and then not have anything left at the end. So that secret element of it cranks up the tension and makes it feel like it is a chase.
Yes.
Which in most games it doesn't feel like that, does it? At all.
No. And what's the added dimension? Because I suppose that mechanic is stolen from James Bond RPG, which we've talked about before. But what I think adds to this is that it encourages you as a director to have a list of cliches or recognisable resources for you to draw upon to describe that chase. So, if you're in Odessa, you're driving your Land Rover down the steps of Odessa. You're driving through streets where there's watermelons in crates. That kind of thing.
Yeah.
Somebody passing with a plate glass window.
Plate glass window. A street full of washing hung out. Once you've thought, it's hard to think of any more, though, isn't it? Then, do you not think? I think that every chase you ever do in Night's Black Agents will have those things in: plate glass window, steps, watermelons, washing. Is there anything else? There's not. I don't think there is. People can write in.
Well, I did a chase through the streets of Leeds, and I always came up from running through shoe shops. So eventually, I ended up parkouring through Dulcis or Freeman Hardy Willis.
80 shoe shop giants.
Yeah.
Washing melons, shoe shops, plate glass windows, steps. No, that's it. There's nothing else. Yeah, like I say, it's narrative. The investigative side is narrative, but it is underpinned by a system. So it feels like a game as well. It has a gamey element to it. Yeah. There is dice rolling, even though it is only a 1d6. I'm not bothered by that at all. I'll let it go.
This is very much a Games Master's game, in the sense that this is a game that gives you, as a Games Master, a lot of stuff to go at. It gives you a toolkit to play with. It gives you lots of information, tips and techniques on how to make a really good thriller experience for your players. What doesn't work so well?
It's hard, isn't it? I find it quite hard actually to think of something that really doesn't work, because I do think it's a very, very good game. It's a really good game. I suppose you could go back to the investigative thing, couldn't you, as we said earlier, just to reiterate that if people spend to kind of get more information, as a games master, you have to be either very good at bullshitting or very well briefed to make it sound convincing, you know. You know, they're looking at the Ming vase, and you give them the clue, and then they go, "Well, no, I'm going to use my investigative skills here to find out some more about the Ming vase." And you think, "Oh God, I don't know." Just make some rubbish up. That can be, I suppose, a little bit unsettling.
I think it's a bit counterintuitive as well, isn't it? Because if you, as a player, what you should do as a director is give everything, isn't it? So if you're faced with a Ming vase, you should give the history of it, when it was done, the circumstances in which it was created, and some of the things that are depicted on the Ming vase in a lot of detail. If you choose to spend, you should actually have it narrowed down to say, actually, what's relevant about this Ming vase is the fact that it depicts a vampire in the middle of it.
Yeah, little vampire there in the corner. Oh yeah, Antiques Roadshow. I suppose. Go on,
but it works the other way around, doesn't it? So you might get the story about the little vampire in the corner. Oh, I'll spend some more points in it. Or, well, I'll give you a load of guff about the dates of its manufacturer, and how the fact that in that particular year the factory was closed down for a year because all of the people working in the factory died or something like that.
Yeah, that's a slight problem. But then again, I think it's probably a price worth paying to not have everyone fail in a roll and then have to say, "Oh, you make it anyway." I suppose the other thing that's not really a problem but takes a bit of getting used to is spending points on things. So under not the investigative stuff, but under your general abilities, spending points to kind of boost a roll. There's a temptation, I think, to spend a few points, or 1 point or 2. In fact, he even mentions this, I think, in the rules. Spend sort of 2 points to try and make a roll and fail anywhere. Yeah. It's almost like your old-fashioned gamer brain thinks, "Oh right, I've got points to boost my rolls. Oh well, I better start using these, hadn't I?" And of course, they don't necessarily help because you can still fail the roll. It's almost like what you've got to learn is, if you're going to spend points, make them count. Yeah. And spend enough points to make that roll. To say, this is a roll I need to make. I am going to spend points now. Enough points to make that roll. I'm not going to spend 1 or 2 points to give me a slightly better chance of doing it, because I can fail anyway, and then it was a waste of time. And I think that's something you need to get your head round, and can initially be a bit frustrating when you've not got used to that idea of spending points. I think that's a bit of an adjustment you've got to make.
I think as well, in the rules, there's not a lot of specificity about when you will replenish points. So depending on some abilities or cherries that you might have the chance to refresh some of the points during play by the clever use of language, or being able to describe things in a clever way. I think that's a lot of pressure on the player, isn't it? So a lot of pressure on the player to have the linguistics of spy movies at hand at the drop of a hat, and people find that a bit difficult. But I've also found it a bit old school, swingy, in that I've run the same adventure 3 times, and that same adventure has been either extremely dangerous or extremely easy, depending on a few changes. And I don't think it's necessarily down to the application by the players or cleverness of the players. I found that, in certain situations, you might get killed by a hail of gunfire just by being unlucky.
That is the interesting thing about spend system, isn't it? That it does present you with that problem of when do you spend? How effective is it to spend? And in reality, and this is true of Numenera as well, a lot of the time you're better just trying to make the roll and then use the points when A, you really have to, or B, your life's on the line. There's an interesting paragraph, isn't there, in Night's Black Agents, I think, about spend points. So it explains the spend system really well, because I know when we played Night's Black Agents and also when we played Numenera, we'd never played spend systems. And at first they feel a bit odd. I've got an ability. So as I spend points, those points diminish, as if I get worse at it as the game progresses. It seems a bit of an odd idea. It's not. Spending is not really about upping your chances in a small way. It's about using them to have that moment in the spotlight. It's to having that moment where you think, this now really counts. So I'm going to spend the points to make that happen, because that's what my character would do. You see what I mean? That's what spend systems are all about. They're a way of driving the narrative, aren't they?
Yeah.
And a way of positioning your character in the narrative and being successful in terms of what's going on. They're not like. It's a bit like RuneQuest, isn't it? Where you got power and you can cast a spell and you spend a couple of power points and get blade sharp and make your weapon a bit better. Spend systems aren't like that. That's not what they're about. They're not about spending a few points just to make things slightly better. They're about spending points at a crucial moment where it really counts. I think that, and certainly Night's Black Agents is about that, I think. But it's just getting your head around that as a gamer, because you're right, you're used to percentages and pluses and minuses and that kind of thing. It doesn't work like that.
So before we go and leave Night's Black Agents, this, of course, is the end of the spy sequence of podcasts that began with Top Secret over 12 months ago now. I'll explain on the blog how that complicated system will work and how we will choose a game to replicate certain scenes from the movies. But I've not worked that out yet. It's quite late.
Too complicated.
It's too complicated. What have I done?
What have you done? You've done it again, haven't you? Come up with some convoluted thing. You know the only way of getting out of it, don't you?
Yeah. Fake me on death.
Fake you on death. It's on the cards, isn't it?
I'm going to do it. I'm going to spend some points on cover. I'm going to set myself up a life in Central America. I'm going to drown in a canoe somewhere on Anglesark in Rivington.
Or drown in the water, you can't drown in a canoe. You have to fall out of the canoe and drown, not drown it. That wouldn't be a convincing. There's just a bit of a tip. It wouldn't be a convincing death. He drowned in a canoe. What, in a canoe? No, he fell out of the canoe. He was eaten by crocodiles or alligators or whatever they are in South America.
I think I could drown in a canoe, even on dry land. I'll be fall into a bowl of cornflakes.
That's it. You can drown in. But you said that at school, didn't you? Well, you can drown in a bowl of cornflakes. Well, you can, but you've got to. I don't know. You're going to be trying, haven't you? There.
Well,
drowned in a canoe full of cornflakes.
That's
more convincing.
Either we'll resolve this issue,
or I will. After recording this, I will get onto eBay. I will order you a canoe and some cornflakes, several boxes, just in case. I keep them at my house, and if you can't replicate these spy scenes that we've picked, I can't even remember. I remember what I've picked. I'll come round with the canoe and the cornflakes.
Okay.
That'll be the end of that.
It's sorted.
Just be the siren.
See you, Blythy.
See you, Dirk.
There isn't another bit. Yeah, I'll put something on the blog, thegrognardfiles.com, about that whole film clip replication thing, if I don't die first. Thanks to Gareth Ryder-Hanrahan for taking a break in his busy writing schedule to speak to us. If you want to see the list of his projects that he's been involved with, then head to RPG Geek and be prepared to be astonished. He's a really great guest, so thank you very much, Gar. Thanks too to Angus, Matt, Ian and Nick for being very responsive and fun players for the virtual GROGMEET and letting me record them for the episode. If you want a really good spy thriller RPG, then I'd recommend that you take time to play Night's Black Agents. It's changed my outlook on gaming tremendously. And due to shortage of time, we never actually got round to saying what I like about the game, such as the cherries on top of your skills that can give you additional benefits to make your spies real super spies, or the finer details of the conspiramid, which allows the games master to construct an adventure with connected NPCs, clues, locations to drive the plot ever upward to the final confrontation with the big boss who's at the centre of things. Or the fact that you can frame your adventures in different spy modes, such as dust, which is where things actually hurt, or burn, which is more like the Bourne adventures, or mirror, which is about suspicion and trust comes into play, like Tinker Tailor's Soldier Spy. It's a very versatile game, and the emphasis really is on just really having a good time. I don't normally say something like this, but even if you buy it just to read, because remember, play's the thing, but this is a book that is really fun to read. So, some parish notices. This year's Grogzine is going to be different from the previous ones. Instead of invoking the spirit of White Dwarf and Imagine, we aim to strike a more irreverent tone, looking at our old favourite Dragon Lords for inspiration. If you want a hard copy, then it's going to be distributed in December. You'll need to be signed up as a Patreon by the end of October 2018. The Patreon scheme really helps to drive the quality of the content and encourages us to continue when we're at a low ebb. The thought of loyal listeners who have thrown us a tip in the beret every month gives us a real kick up the arse when we can't be bothered. Thanks, it really matters. It's helped us to buy a new computer to make editing easier, as well as supporting other projects associated with the Grog Squad. So thanks to Wayne Peters and Jeff Bernstein for tipping $1 a month. Thanks. For those that pledge $5 a month, I offer them a virtual gift from the game under discussion. There's a distinct lack of tables in Night's Black Agents, so I'm going to give them some flavoursome backgrounds. Neil Hunt is going to be writing a piece for the Grogzine, and he used to be a bagman. Brendan, he's a mule. He ought to know better. Ed Keenan is a known cobbler, so I'll be checking those tips carefully. Lloyd Burt is a cuckoo. Ka-choo. Let's keep those mowing blades sharp. Stephen Wilcott, he's a bag and a burner. Mark Boardman, he's a cleaner, available most weekdays. Finally, Steve Ray. He was Jimmy the Wheel Devil in the UK Games Expo game. Thanks to you all. You're a great crew. Now, are you ready for one last job? This podcast has been going for 3 years. In the first episode, we talked about RuneQuest. In 2018, a new edition has been released, so it seems like a good time to revisit the RuneQuest of the past. We'll look at the Avalon Hill years, the Renaissance, Sun County, our thoughts on the new rules, and much, much more. Until then, adios, amigos.